urgently needed bill.
Mr Speaker.
Chris Farfoy.
Mr Speaker, I guess it's best summed up. What I'm going to say is that it didn't have to be this way. The Law Commission put forward its report on this issue in April 2011, and here we are in the year 2013 in April, and this legislation is being put through this House. And while we are supportive of the referral motion that the Minister is seeking to bring the Select Committee stage for submissions from around 4 or 6 months, which is the usual term, down to 2 months, we are very concerned that that really takes away the time for public scrutiny around this bill. And there will be plenty of public scrutiny, Mr Chair. In the earlier contributions, members from right around this House were talking about the numbers of stories that they had in their own communities around concern around the use of party pills and legal highs. So we expect there to be a significant amount of scrutiny and comment from the public, and to have that window of opportunity for people to make their submissions reduced from around 4 to 6 months, which is the usual amount of time, down to 2 months, Mr Chair, is a concern for us in order for us to have the submissions listened to in a meaningful manner. Mr Chair, as the Honourable Annette King said, you've got to have some sympathy for the Honourable Peter Dunn, who is in charge of this bill, because he has been pushing for this bill for some time. As I said, the Law Commission report came out in April 2011, and I'm sure behind the scenes he would have been pushing the government very hard for this legislation to get in and be passed by the time that the temporary legislation runs out, becomes invalid in August of this year. So now we found ourselves in a situation where the Minister has to come to this House, ask for us to truncate the Select Committee period in order for his law, a very good law that we're saying, to be effective, so there is no window of opportunity for the likes of the chronic and the K2 and the Dream and the other substances, all sorts of substances, to not go back on the shelves. So again, Mr Speaker, I just reiterate, it didn't have to be this way if the government had acted faster to get this legislation to the House. It was introduced in February 2013 this year, despite the government making recommendations in 2012, I believe around September, that legislation would be made available to this House. So it's taken a considerable amount of time, and I'm sure a considerable amount of lobbying has gone on behind the scenes by Peter Dunn to get this legislation to the House, but it has taken another 6 to 8 months for it to be introduced. And Mr Dunn now has to come to this House and ask for us to truncate the Select Committee period. Well, we don't think that is good enough in terms of the management of legislation by the government in this House. Mr Speaker, as the Honourable Member said in his opening address to this referral motion, he doesn't believe that there will be a lot of issues raised at the Select Committee process, but one of the issues that he did refer to was one that I mentioned in the first reading around the classification of kava, which I think is a serious issue, because while I mentioned it, members on the other side of the House said that it might not necessarily be included in this bill. But there's nothing in this bill, Mr Speaker, to say that kava may not be. So I believe that is one of the issues that, and Sam Lotuinga will be interested in this. Because I'm sure he's never shy of an Ava ceremony. So if you read the bill at clause 9, which is the meaning of a psychoactive substance, it doesn't say anywhere in that part of the bill that it's just synthetic substances. So that is something that I think, Mr Speaker, needs to be addressed at a Select Committee. I'm sure there will be a lot of interest in the Pacific community around making sure that they get put their legitimate questions and their opinions to the Select Committee. But because that Select Committee submission period is going to be truncated from the usual 4 to 6 months to 2 months, that is going to make it a little bit more difficult for those communities to put their argument across. So it isn't scaremongering. It's actually the truth, because those communities will now have a smaller window of opportunity to make the... I have read the bill. I have read the bill. So you go to clause 9 and you tell me where it doesn't say, where it says this only covers synthetic materials. It doesn't. So that is one of the valid questions that I think that the Pacific community can put to the Select Committee to make sure that their rituals around the Ava and Kava ceremonies could be protected for their own cultural identity. Paul Hutchison said in the first reading debate that that this government wanted to get the law through in a fairly rapid way, which is, as Annette King said, was crocodile tears from the government, because they haven't moved in a very rapid way with this legislation at all. On this side of the House, we do want to make sure that we get this legislation through in a rapid way, but nothing that this government has done in terms of this, the passage of this legislation has seen them moving in any fast way at all. And the Minister said it was a cat and mouse in terms of the particulars around the technology and the fast-moving nature of this industry. But this government has moved more like turtles in terms of the way that it has introduced this legislation to the House. And again, we do have some sympathy for Peter Dunn, because I'm sure he would have wanted to have made this legislation get through this House much, much faster. Mr Chair, we will support the referral motion to reduce the submission time to 2 months. It isn't without concern. It does mean that the window of opportunity for submitters is much smaller, and that the public won't get a much more fulsome opportunity to debate this issue.
The question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Chairman, thank you. I rise to take a very short call in this